So, I'm going to talk about this, the art of healing the earth. And I'm very thankful, of course, to NIOO. So I have to thank the Common Land Foundation, but I also have to thank all these people because over the last 20 years, somebody has thought going ahead and studying this was interesting and important. So many different organizations have supported my work over time, and I'm very thankful for this. I should really get one of those Formula One suits, I think. So it's been a very long personal journey for me to do this because I didn't start out studying ecology or doing ecology. I was a television cameraman. And I worked in China and around the world. So I was able to help to open the CBS News Bureau at the time of normalization of relations between China and the United States. And I covered various international events like the rise of China from poverty and isolation, the Tiananmen tragedy, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So I started to, as a young person in my 20s and 30s, I was watching transformational change on a geopolitical stage. But something strange happened to me because in 1995, I was asked to go look at the List Plateau and film this for the World Bank. And when I got there and I saw this, I sort of changed my opinion about some things. I started to realize that on the List Plateau, you could see all of geologic time, all of evolutionary time, and all of human history. And that the geopolitical events that the news cycles are covering are trivial in comparison. So the rise of China, the Tiananmen, and the collapse of the Soviet Union, few people will remember these things. But we'll all be left with the results of our understanding of ecological systems. Now, the List Plateau is in the northwest of China. It's in the upper and middle reaches, and it's named for its geomorphology. So if you dig about in there, because this is the cradle of Chinese civilization, you'll find some extraordinary things, because human beings have lived there for a very long time. It's one of the most ancient civilizations. And this is to the southwest, and it's a fully functional system, but in 1995, it looked like this. So I became fascinated. Why did this happen? What happened here? And as I continued to study, I found that this wasn't just studying Chinese history. This was actually studying the whole of human history, because all the cradles of civilization seem to have gone pretty much in the same way. So what I found in going there and then looking at the different ways you could study it, you could look at the literature, there's fossil evidence, there's lots of evidence. But this was a very nurturing place. It was the second place on Earth where settled agriculture began, and it gave birth to the largest ethnic group on the planet. So it must have been a fantastic place. And because of the properties of loess, it's a powdery, mineral-rich soil. So if it has organic materials, it's extremely fertile. But by this point, it was fundamentally ruined. And so I started by studying dysfunctional systems. So what I was looking at was a system which all the ecological function had been lost. And I was trying to understand, well, you know, how does this work? And you never needed to urinate when you were there, because you were just had all the moisture sucked out of your body. The evaporation rates were enormous. Temperature differentials were completely different than they would be in a functional system. And there was this deep poverty, this victimhood almost, where people were just stunned into suffering, and they expected it to be terrible. This is a place where they don't get married because they don't have enough money to take care of a family. So these people are miserable. And they're burning all the biomass. Don't give up. They're burning all the biomass. If you don't learn the lessons of history, you're going to repeat them. So it was into this place that the World Bank brought experts, Chinese experts, international experts, to try to figure out what you could do. And I'm going to ask the head of the World Bank's Agriculture Department now.
Now, when we came to this place in the List Plateau the first time, we were all really shocked. We thought, oh my God, well, how can ever anybody try to rehabilitate an area that is so huge and so fundamentally destroyed ecologically? And the truth is, we spent 2 years working with the local people, with the farmers, with the local officials, with the experts in the various fields of hydrology, soil and water conservation, forestry, agriculture, environment, try to understand what it would take to do something like this. And after 2 years, we still didn't have many answers. The World Bank didn't have the answer, and the local people didn't have the answer. And we spent another 1.5 years talking to the farmers in the villages, trying to understand what they had done in the past 20 or 30 years that was successful. And it was really interesting. Not much was there to show, because the current practices at that time were just not sustainable at all.
So, in analyzing what had happened, they had devegetated the area. And this massively changed the microclimates below the canopy. And all of the organic material, because there's no cycle of life and death anymore, all the organic matter was gone. And they had gone into sort of the end game is this goat herding, and there's nothing else that can survive. And then you find the fundamental basic functions like hydrology are completely disrupted. So you've altered gas exchange, you've altered nutrient recycling and nutrient release from the microbiologic communities that are no longer there, and you've massively altered infiltration and retention of rainfall. So human beings didn't understand this, and they followed a course over thousands of years, which through tiny accumulations of this dysfunction led to massive, massive disruptions. And when you start to realize it's affecting temperatures, the temperature differentials on exposed soils as opposed to below a canopy of any kind, a grass canopy, a tree canopy, are huge. Evaporation rates in microclimates below a canopy, completely different. And the organic materials and the biodiversity, these are the basic functions. And they had all been lost in this area.
还点一点还叫种树木，哎，我树啊，刨稻的地现在都栽有树嘛，北片都刨稻的地都现在栽有树啊。我看这些，就像我说，我在我死呀嘛，看你们吃，哎，吃的稀别分嘛，看吃啥呀吧。
This was the attitude of the local people. And it was quite extraordinary because they were trapped in a cycle of poverty and ecologic destruction. The more they did, the worse the situation became because nothing they were doing was at all sustainable. And so they had a massive effort to change this. And we made a film in 2009. It's called Hope in a Changing Climate. It's also the basis of the Green Gold film. And it shows the actions that were taken and the result. So what they did was they said, we have to end poverty. We have to end poverty for these people in one generation. They can't continue to do what they're doing. You can't say, I'm going to increase their productivity by 25% or something like this. It would be useless. They had to completely change their behaviors. So they used participatory mechanisms to engage the people in the question. I wonder how, if you ask a question, I wonder how the water infiltrates. What is it that holds the water into the soil? How is the soil formed? And, then they got them involved. They also used another method which was very effective. They paid them. That works pretty well. And so what happens was they paid them for 10 years to transform this area. And in doing this, they learned completely new behaviors and they left old behaviors behind. And they were investing their own time, their own energy, their lives. And the government and the World Bank and others were investing the capital necessary to turn this around. So the landscape seems to reflect the consciousness that human beings have. So if you understand how the systems function and you align human behavior with these natural evolutionary trends, then you get a completely different result. But if you put the human desires ahead of the ecological trends and say that they're more important, we need them, we want them, then you're probably going to degrade the system.
我们的这个做法就是这个规划就是山上
The goal was to give a hat to the hilltops, give a belt to the hills as well as shoes at the base.
山上戴帽的就是山上全部都种草。
The hat meant that the top of these hills had to be replanted with trees.
这个要例子的就是推楼田。
The belt meant that terraces had to be built to be used for crop planting and also for trees.
沟底穿靴子就是打坝。
The shoes were the dams which we had to build, so that the hills could grow back to life and our economy as well as our lives could improve.
这个经济能够发展那边的生活。
When I first filmed Mr. Ta Fuyuan and his colleagues back in 1995, I had no idea this initiative could achieve such dramatic results. The effort that people put into converting their slopes into terraces has resulted in a marked increase in agricultural productivity. The higher yields are directly related to the return of natural vegetation in the surrounding ecological land. Well, for me, this was an epiphany. To see this take place and then to look and analyze the way human society is organized. It looks like we're just going in the wrong direction, because what you find is, if you understand how these ecosystems function, you can rehydrate dehydrated biomes. You can create fertility in places with no fertility. And you can re-regulate the hydrological cycle, the weather, and the climate, because we're altering these physically. So essentially, when I saw this, I saw it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. But I don't see this taking place in very many places, so why not? We can do this. Why don't we do this? And it just became something that I wanted to understand, and fortunately all those logos helped me to continue to try to understand it. I found within this there are many, 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 many scientific implications. And I'm always surprised because I meet some students and say, what should I study? And I'm going like, how can you know, it's like everywhere are theses littering the earth. So there's too much that we need to do. We're not doing the right things. We're asking the wrong questions. We need to ask fundamental questions. We need to realize now that we're global disruptions. So our ecosystems are not just being compromised in individual locations. We're affecting planetary scales. So the oceans, the atmosphere, the climate, biodiversity loss, it's outrageous. So if we don't understand this, we're 7.3 or 4 billion people now. We're adding 1 billion people every 12 years. We need to understand what this means. It means there's an answer to these problems. But we have to pay attention. We have to realize that there is an answer, and it's up to us to learn this and to change our behaviors. So I also wanted to know whether China was special because it has a strong authoritarian government and it was getting rich, and so it was sort of different than some other places. I wonder if it could work anywhere else. The Rothamsted Research Institute, you may know of this place in Britain. I was given a fellowship in 2006, and I didn't know what that meant at all, by the way. And then I went to Africa, and everybody went, "You're the Rothamsted International Fellow?" You know, because they'd all heard of Rothamsted. So, yeah, hello, you know. And the British government, as soon as the director said go to Africa, I was sent to Africa. And Rwanda had an extraordinary outcome. Many things that I've seen in Rwanda remind me of some of the things that I've seen in China. The Chinese government was asking this generation and all the generations alive today to change the course of human history, to take the denuded landscape that they had and somehow alter this. They took it seriously. This is a letter thanking me for going and sharing this information. That's very nice, isn't it? And this is a letter that says they're rewriting their land use policy laws, and they're instituting a process to restore the ecology in the entire country, and to link their economic development together with ecological understanding. That's 8 years ago. There's 8 years of data.
We are giving ourselves maybe 3 years of growth so that by 2020 we have 30% of actually forested area. So there's now did an aggressive campaign across the country to restore destroyed forests.
There has been a lot of restoration that has been carried out relating to our environment. And we've seen that restoration grow from year to another year.
We have a target of increasing our electricity generation. Today we are at about 97 megawatts, and we want to increase that to 1,000 megawatts in the next 8 years. and we are targeting that about 80% or so of that source of energy should be renewable energy, mainly from hydropower electricity and from geothermal. So from 2014 we want to be producing any electricity from fossil fuels.
Because as individual smallholders, they have no hope of accessing markets at all. So we took up the policy of land consolidation to ensure that. And we've been successful at that. We started it 4 years ago, and we as Rwanda now, today we are very proud to say we are food secure.
We've been growing at an average of 8.2%. And we've seen more than 1 million people of population lifted out of poverty in the last 5 years. That's 12% of our population. And we've achieved this within this mode of growth that caters for environment as well.
It seems like if you link economic development with ecological function, it will work. Now, I think there's quite a lot of research that can be done in all these things, but also I realize now that the time is extremely limited. So I've been fortunate, privileged, to go all over the world, to look at ecosystems in every continent, and to meet many of the people who are working in various fields in all over the world. And I've come to some feelings or some conclusions about what I think is happening. I think that we have to look at ecological systems from a point of view of simply function and dysfunction. And I think that evolution is of enormous importance for us. And when I think to follow this line of reasoning, I have to think back to the beginning of the earth, and it was a molten rock surrounded by poisonous gases. And over prodigious time, it's been altered by biological life into a wonderful garden. And there's a biochemical photoreactive process with a very long R&D period, which is very functional. It's unlikely we're going to make a machine that can do anything like this. And this huge amounts of organic material that have emerged over time. And the fact that I started to think about reincarnation, and I started to realize our bodies are made up of the same substances that were in earlier generations of life. There's no other possibility. Science tells us we are all related. We all have a common ancestor. We are a species, and we are now called to act on a planetary scale. If we can't achieve this, then the outcome looks pretty grim, because we're affecting every ecosystem on the planet. And many of these systems are threatened with collapse. And if they collapse at a time when we have these levels of human populations, then the outcome will be catastrophic for human civilization. So we see the problem, and we also know that there's some solutions. What I saw in this evolutionary considerations of evolution, that's just cheating. That's a cheetah nursing in the wild. Never mind. But what I saw is that all of the functional systems are accumulative. They're abundant. We have made a serious error. We have valued scarcity and not abundance. We have to look very, very carefully at this. because the functional systems are abundant and the dysfunctional systems are disaccumulative. So if we're aligned with natural systems, we're going to unleash enormous power. And if we are not aligned with natural systems, we're knocking our head against the wall. Because all of our shiny instruments, all of our stuff turns to junk. So we can have a lovely computer, we have these cameras, we have our buildings, and no one will remember this stuff because it's going to degrade. But these natural systems are continuous and renewable. And it's also interesting to hang out of a helicopter with the door off. I highly recommend it. So what this tells me is that human beings emerged in paradise. And you know, I used to go to church with my mother. She would make me. And then I learned about football, and but you know, human beings emerge in paradise. If you look at cosmologies, religious cosmologies, human beings emerged in paradise. If you look at evolution, human beings emerged in paradise. And what is it about the systems which are perfect? I started studying dysfunction. I got real tired of that. And I got very depressed by it. And then I wanted to say, well, what is the opposite of this? So then I made it a point to go to the pristine places which remain on the earth, and they're everywhere. There's nothing wrong with the earth. The earth is in terrific shape. All of the evolutionary trends are continuous. You can't do anything about them. If you oppose them, they will kill you. That's all that will happen. Natural systems in the earth and life, they're going to be fine. It'll be different. It will evolve. But it will be fine. So I started to look at these three systems. There are three main things that I look at. One is total colonization of the planet by biological life. So if you see exposed soils somewhere, that's not normal. You can only see exposed soils in a tectonic event or volcanic eruption or something like this. If you see, this is peatlands in Russia. It's so wonderful. And you know, when you see the natural systems, they're in a type of equilibrium, and there is a type of climax equilibrium. Ecologists have not been talking about climax lately, but I think climax needs to make a comeback. You know, we need to think about this. The height of the canopy. The trees on the western coast of the United States are reacting. The height of the canopy is increasing enormously there. This is a reaction. And this is, if we look now at the domesticated canopies, how much different are we talking about? Now, on the west coast, the high is 115 meters high canopy. What kind of a microclimate have you got down there? What kind of temperature differentials have you got between that and exposed soils? Well, I know scientists who are talking about 10 degrees centigrade. I know scientists are talking about 20 degrees centigrade. And I even heard some people talk about 30 degrees centigrade. A little worried about that one. But maybe. And biodiversity, the role of biodiversity. The role of all this organic material. Organic material is the basis of all this. Soils are living. They have huge microbiologic communities. These are the largest communities of life forms. We need to be in awe of this. We can't be in awe of a beautiful car or a kind of glass chrome building or something. We have to see it. Now I look at those things and I think, oh, you know, it's kind of pretty now, but 10 years the car, 20 years the car is going to be junked. And the buildings, you know, who look at Angkor Wat, look at ancient civilization, go to Rome. That's what you have to realize. This is real. This is what's lasting. This is we're breathing air. You know, we're drinking water and we're filtering any pollutant that's been released. How dare we put out any pollutant anywhere? It's ludicrous for an agency of the government to say, oh, well, this is the acceptable level of dioxin or polychloral biphenyls or anything. You know, you're kidding. What are you talking about? There's no acceptable amount. That's a poison. Why would we do that? It doesn't make any sense. And I realize that over human history, we didn't know these things. We emerged 40,000 years ago. We were driving mastodons. 12,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, we started to do settled agriculture. And if I analyze how this agriculture is done, modern agriculture is following this. We're doing exactly the same things. And I can tell you the result, because I've seen dozens of places around the world that have been completely collapsed because they did this. And the people are miserable and they're kind of stupid. They just, you know, they're tired and miserable because they live in a degraded state. And that degraded state reflects the state of their consciousness, their understanding. And if they understand how this is, get a completely different result. We need to go to the worst places on the earth and restore them to the Garden of Eden. If we do this, we'll have another result. If we go to the best places and use the same methods that turned all these places into deserts, then, well, I think we're just about done. So what I saw now is if you have a carbon budget of 246 gigatons remaining, and we're emitting 11 gigatons annually, that's your window of opportunity. If we don't act on this rapidly, then we're going to cross those thresholds. And the things that we're believing in now, the things that we're promoting, the things that we're marketing, and it's junk. And we need to get out of that, and we need to go very, very real. And we need to see that there is great beauty and great value in abundance and in nature and in biodiversity and in fertility. We used to worship fertility. I think we should do that. You know, we should like dance around the fire or something. I think we are embarking on the great work of our time. If we fail to do this, then future generations are going to look back and they're going to say, what were you thinking about? All the signs are there. History lays it all out in front of you, and then you think that the guy who has the most stuff when he dies wins? It can't possibly be true. This is just putting, or just straw into the ground, and then seeds blow up or the birds land. Any moisture wicks down the straw, it starts to degrade, microbes come. You can restore. Vegetation will grow. This is dune stabilization. It's a massively labor intensive. Why don't we do that? 55% of young people in Spain have no jobs. This is organic soil which is being grown by the head of the Demeter, if you follow the biodynamics, eat their food. No pollutants for decades. They won't allow you to throw your apple core in their compost bin because they don't know where the apple came from. Very good compost. Very nice. Everything smells good. It's fragrant and beautiful. That's what we need to think about. This is Yoda. This is, for 60 years, this man, well, since 1960, 55 years or something, this man has been working in Africa.
The most important thing is to as fast as possible, get vegetation to grow. And that can be again done in very adverse areas.
That's what he takes mining
what
pits
happened
and
now,
turns it into the Garden of
there's
Eden.
hardly a place in these quarries down there which has no vegetation. There's grass, there's trees, everything. Before, you know, it was 2.5 square kilometers of desert.
So it's possible. Everywhere around the world you see this. Now the problem is that economically speaking, people say, well, how much does it cost to do restoration? And what they're saying is, in this economic system, we have money which is produced by production of goods and services. The GDP, the total amount of our economy, is what is produced and consumed and traded. And maybe somehow speculation between the cost price. I don't know how that works. Nobody knows how that works. And the oceans, the atmosphere, the river systems, biodiversity, microbial communities, they're zero in this economic system. It can't be true. There's a major lie, a falsehood. If you have an equation and you have something which is wrong, and you try to make the equation come out, I don't think you can make it come out if you got a mistake. We have a mistake at the core of human security. For our history, and especially since feudalism, slavery, imperialism, colonization, and mercantile expansion since the Industrial Revolution, we've said that money comes from production and consumption of goods and services. That's not what they said in the cosmologies of Indians in the Amazon, or people in Africa, or people in North America, or many peoples in Asia. And they were told, well, you're barbaric and we have guns and your land is our land. And you can't do that. You have this economic system. It's killing us. This economic system is going to completely degrade this thing, the Earth systems. And no one will benefit. Now, slavery is no longer acceptable. Maybe we ought to look at where the problem is. So we can restore the degraded landscapes on the earth, but we have to value them higher than products and services. If you value ecological systems and that becomes the basis of human economy, it doesn't cost anything to restore them. And all human efforts go toward restoration. And then in 200 years from now, or 500 years from now, you'll get climax systems. Not totally, because some of the trees are thousands of years old. But we need to go in that direction. We can't be going in the direction where we're constantly disaccumulating. So we need to find models for transformational change. We can't go on the way we're going. My friend, Willem Verwoerde, who you may know, is working on something with the Common Land Foundation. I'm going to ask him to share his thoughts.
I only know that we have to work fast to get a model ready for companies, investors and states, governments to restore landscapes. So what I propose is that we go to a system where we have 4 returns per hectare, and that a financial return or an investment return is a logical thing, but there are other 3 returns. the return of natural capital, or the return of nature, you could say, here. The return of jobs, very important, because we are talking about people who want to work or need work and want to live well. But maybe the most important is return of inspirational capital or return of inspiration. If you bring the return of inspiration back in the landscape, it will also bring back a return of meaningfulness in people themselves.
There are other models. So that's a model which is driven by capital management with local communities. It's a comprehensive model. But are there other ones? One I'm looking at is research, training, and innovation centers for ecological restoration. So if we need these skilled people who know that it's possible to restore and have the skills to restore hydrology, soil fertility, biodiversity, and say eco-agriculture or ecologically sound agriculture. Now this is Jordan, in the Jordan Valley. So it's 45 minutes from Jericho. And that was 2009, this is 2010, this is going to be 2011, I think, coming up. And what you're seeing here, this is Jeff Loughton from the Permaculture Research Institute's Center. But what's happening is that you can get a closed canopy. Within 4 or 5 years, you can do this. Now, what if you did that in the whole region? So the princess is giving us 10 to 15 hectares near the Amman airport. And we can build a ger camp with those yurts, Mongolian yurts. And local people, refugees from Palestine and Syria, and people from all over the world. We've already got 3 graduate students who've convinced their universities to allow them to get their degrees by making the design. And we think that what I've been looking at now is, if we have to go to the worst places, well, I think you can't go to Syria. It's the worst place, but you can't go there. But you can get pretty close if you go to Jordan, and you can make something that can have an outpouring of goodwill, an outpouring of compassion and knowledge and without prejudice. And you can create peace, wage peace. We need to wage peace. If we don't have peace, it won't matter in the next 20 years. So what we're seeing is that this is happening. And we have to realize that transformational change is coming. And I don't know, somehow in my life, that's all I've done is look at transformational change. So I'm not surprised. I think transformational change is inevitable. And of course, there's plenty to learn. So I hope you'll all study hard and be in awe. Thank you.